Why were there no wars now? Perhaps there were. Men were fighting in China. Chinamen killing one another. What for? Scripps wondered. What was it all about, anyway? Mandy, the buxom waitress, leaned forward. "Say," she said, "did I ever tell you about the last words of Henry James?" "Really, dear Mandy," Mrs. Scripps said, "you've told that story rather often." "Let's hear it," Scripps said. "I'm very interested in Henry James." Henry James, Henry James. That chap who had gone away from his own land to live in England among Englishmen. Why had he done it? For what had he left America? Weren't his roots here? His brother William, Boston, pragmatism, Harvard University, old John Harvard with silver buckles on his shoes, Charlie Brickley, Eddie Mahan. Where were they now? "Well," Mandy began, "Henry James became a British subject on his deathbed. At once, as soon as the king heard Henry James had become a British subject, he sent around the highest decoration in his power to bestow, the Order of Merit." "The O.M.," the elderly Mrs. Scripps explained. "That was it," the waitress said. Professors Goss and Saintsbury came with the man who brought the decoration. Henry James was lying on his deathbed, and his eyes were shut. There was a single candle on a table beside the bed. The nurse allowed them to come near the bed, and they put the ribbon of the decoration around James's neck, and the decoration lay on the sheet over Henry James's chest. Professors Goss and Saintsbury leaned forward and smoothed the ribbon of the decoration. Henry James never opened his eyes. The nurse told them they must all go out of the room, and they all went out of the room. When they were all gone, Henry James spoke to the nurse. He never opened his eyes. "Nurse," Henry James said, "put out the candle, nurse, and spare my blushes." Those were the last words he ever spoke. James was quite a writer, Scripps O'Neill said. He was strangely moved by the story. "You don't always tell it the same way, dear," Mrs. Scripps remarked to Mandy. There were tears in Mandy's eyes. "I feel very strongly about Henry James," she said. "What was the matter with James?" asked the drummer. "Wasn't America good enough for him?" Scripps O'Neill was thinking about Mandy, the waitress. What a background she must have, that girl. What a fund of anecdotes. A chap could go far with a woman like that to help him. He stroked the little bird that sat on the lunch counter before him. The bird pecked at his finger. Was the little bird a hawk? A falcon, perhaps, from one of the big Michigan falconries. Was it perhaps a robin, pulling and tugging at the early worm on some green lawn somewhere, he wondered. "What do you call your bird?" the drummer asked. "I haven't named him yet. What would you call him?" "Why not call him Ariel?" Mandy asked. "Or Puck," Mrs. Scripps put in. "What's it mean?" asked the drummer. "It's a character out of Shakespeare," Mandy explained. "Oh, give the bird a chance." "What would you call him?" Scripps turned to the drummer. "He ain't a parrot, is he?" asked the drummer. "If he was a parrot, you could call him Polly." "There's a character in the Beggar's Opera called Polly," Mandy explained. Scripps wondered. Perhaps the bird was a parrot strayed from some comfortable home with some old maid, the untilled soil of some New England spinster. Better wait till you see how he turns out, the drummer advised. You got plenty of time to name him. This drummer had sound ideas. He, Scripps, did not even know what sex the bird was, whether he was a boy bird or a girl bird. Wait till you see if he lays eggs, the drummer suggested. Scripps looked into the drummer's eyes. The fellow had voiced his own unspoken thought. "You know a thing or two, drummer," he said. "Well," the drummer admitted modestly, "I ain't drummed all these years for nothing." "You're right there, pal," Scripps said. "That's a nice bird you got there, brother," the drummer said. "You want to hang on to that bird." Scripps knew it. Ah, these drummers know a thing or two, going up and down over the face of this great America of ours. These drummers kept their eyes open. They were no fools. "Listen," the drummer said. He pushed his derby hat off his brow and, leaning forward, spat into the tall brass cuspidor that stood beside his stool. "I want to tell you about a pretty beautiful thing that happened to me once in Bay City." Mandy, the waitress, leaned forward. Mrs. Scripps leaned toward the drummer to hear better. The drummer looked apologetically at Scripps and stroked the bird with his forefinger. "Tell you about it some other time, brother," he said. Scripps understood. From out of the kitchen, through the wicket in the hall, came a high-pitched, haunting laugh. Scripps listened. Could that be the laughter of the Negro? He wondered. Chapter 9. Scripps going slowly to work in the pump factory in the mornings. Mrs. Scripps looking out of the window and watching him go up the street. Not much time for reading The Guardian now. Not much time for reading about English politics. Not much time for worrying about the cabinet crises over there in France. The French were a strange people. Joan of Arc, Eva Le Gallienne, Clemenceau, Georges Carpentier, Sacha Guitry, Yvonne Printemps, Groc, Les Fratellinis, Gilbert Seldes, the Dial Prize, Marianne Moore, E. Cummings, The Enormous Room, Vanity Fair, Frank Crowninshield. What was it all about? Where was it taking her? She had a man now, a man of her own, for her own. Could she keep him? Could she hold him for her own? She wondered. Mrs. Scripps, formerly an elderly waitress, now the wife of Scripps O'Neill with a good job in the pump factory. Diana Scripps. Diana was her own name. It had been her mother's, too. Diana Scripps looking into the mirror and wondering, could she hold him? It was getting to be a question. Why had he ever met Mandy? Would she have the courage to break off going to the restaurant with Scripps to eat? She couldn't do that. He would go alone. She knew that. It was no use trying to pull wool over her own eyes. He would go alone, and he would talk with Mandy. Diana looked into the mirror. Could she hold him? Could she hold him? That thought never left her now. Every night at the restaurant, she couldn't call it a beanery now. That made a lump come in her throat and made her throat feel hard and choky. Every night at the restaurant now, Scripps and Mandy talked together. The girl was trying to take him away. Him, her Scripps, trying to take him away. Take him away. Could she, Diana, hold him? She was no better than a slut, that Mandy. Was that the way to do? Was that the thing to do? Go after another woman's man? Come between man and wife? Break up a home? And all with these interminable literary reminiscences, these endless anecdotes. Scripps was fascinated by Mandy. Diana admitted that to herself, but she might hold him. That was all that mattered now. To hold him, not to let him go. Make him stay. She looked into the mirror. Diana, subscribing for the Forum. Diana reading The Mentor. Diana reading William Lyon Phelps in Scribner's. Diana walking through the frozen streets of the silent northern town to the public library to read the Literary Digest book review. Diana waiting for the postman to come, bringing the bookman. Diana in the snow, waiting for the postman to bring the Saturday Review of Literature. Diana, bareheaded now, standing in the mounting snowdrifts, waiting for the postman to bring her the New York Times literary section. Was it doing any good? Was it holding him? At first it seemed to be. Diana learned editorials by John Farrar by heart. Scripps brightened. A little of the old light shining in Scripps' eyes even now. Then it died. Some little mistake in the wording, some slip in her understanding of a phrase, some divergence in her attitude made it all ring false. She would go on. She was not beaten. He was her man, and she would hold him. She looked away from the window and slit open the covering of the magazine that lay on her table. It was Harper's Magazine. Harper's Magazine in a new format. Harper's Magazine completely changed and revised. Perhaps that would do the trick. She wondered. Chapter 10. Spring was coming. Spring was in the air. Author's note. This is the same day on which the story starts, back on page 3. A Chinook wind was blowing. Workmen were coming home from the factory. Scripps' bird singing in its cage. Diana looking out of the open window. Diana watching for her Scripps to come up the street. Could she hold him? Could she hold him? If she couldn't hold him, would he leave her his bird? She had felt lately that she couldn't hold him. In the nights now, when she touched Scripps, he rolled away, not toward her. It was a little sign. But life was made up of little signs. She felt she couldn't hold him. As she looked out of the window, a copy of the Century magazine dropped from her nerveless hand. The Century had a new editor. There were more woodcuts. Glenn Frank had gone to head some great university somewhere. There were more Van Dorens on the magazine. Diana felt that might turn the trick. Happily, she had opened the Century and read all morning. Then the wind, the warm Chinook wind, had started to blow, and she knew Scripps would soon be home. Men were coming down the street in increasing numbers. Was Scripps among them? She did not like to put on her spectacles to look. She wanted Scripps's first glimpse of her to be of her at her best. As she felt him drawing nearer, the confidence she had had in the Century grew fainter. She had so hoped that would give her the something which would hold him. She wasn't sure now. Scripps coming down the street with a crowd of excited workmen. Men stirred by the spring. Scripps swinging his lunch bucket, Scripps waving goodbye to the workmen who trooped one by one into what had formerly been a saloon. Scripps not looking up at the window. Scripps coming up the stairs. Scripps coming nearer. Scripps coming nearer. Scripps here. "Good afternoon, dear Scripps," she said. "I've been reading a story by Ruth Succo." "Hello, Diana," Scripps answered. He set down his lunch pail. She looked worn and old. He could afford to be polite. "What was the story about, Diana?" he asked. "It was about a little girl in Iowa," Diana said. She moved toward him. "It was about people on the land. It reminded me of a little of my own lake country." "That so?" asked Scripps. In some ways, the pump factory had hardened him. His speech had become more clipped, more like these hardy northern workers. But his mind was the same. "Would you like me to read a little of it out loud?" Diana asked. "There are some lovely woodcuts." "How about going down to the beanery?" Scripps said. "As you wish, dear," Diana said. Then her voice broke. I wish you'd never seen that place." She wiped away her tears. Scripps had not even seen them. "I'll bring the bird, dear," Diana said. "He hasn't been out all day." Together they went down the street to the beanery. They did not walk hand in hand now. They walked like what are called old married people. Mrs. Scripps carried the bird cage. The bird was happy in the warm wind. Men lurching along, drunk with the spring, passed them. Many spoke to Scripps. He was well known and well liked in the town now. Some, as they lurched by, raised their hats to Mrs. Scripps. She responded vaguely. "If I can only hold him," she was thinking. "If I can only hold him." As they walked along the slushy snow of the narrow sidewalk of the northern town, something began to beat in her head. Perhaps it was the rhythm of their walking together. "I can't hold him. I can't hold him. I can't hold him." Scripps took her arm as they crossed the street. When his hand touched her arm, Diana knew it was true. She would never hold him. A group of Indians passed them on the street. Were they laughing at her, or was it some tribal jest? Diana didn't know. All she knew was that rhythm that beat into her brain. "I can't hold him. I can't hold him." Author's note. For the reader, not the printer. What difference does it make to the printer? Who is the printer, anyway? Gutenberg. The Gutenberg Bible. Caxton. 12-point open-face Caslin. The linotype machine. The author as a little boy being sent to look for type lice. The author as a young man being sent for the key to the forms. Ah, they knew a trick or two, these printers. In case the reader is becoming confused, we are now up to where the story opened with Yogi Johnson and Scripps O'Neill in the pump factory itself, with the Chinook wind blowing. As you see, Scripps O'Neill has now come out of the pump factory and is on his way to the beanery with his wife, who is afraid she cannot hold him. Personally, we don't believe she can, but the reader will see for himself. We will now leave the couple on their way to the beanery and go back and take up Yogi Johnson. We want the reader to like Yogi Johnson. The story will move a little faster from now on, in case any of the readers are tiring. We will also try and work in a number of good anecdotes. Would it be any violation of confidence if we told the reader that we get the best of these anecdotes from Mr. Ford Madox Ford? We owe him our thanks, and we hope the reader does too. At any rate, we will now go on with Yogi Johnson. Yogi Johnson, the reader may remember, is the chap who was in the war. As the story opens, he is just coming out of the pump factory. See page 3. It is very hard to write this way, beginning things backward, and the author hopes the reader will realize this and not grudge this little word of explanation. I know I would be very glad to read anything the reader ever wrote, and I hope the reader will make the same sort of allowances. If any of the readers would care to send me anything they ever wrote for criticism or advice, I am always at the Café du Dôme any afternoon talking about art with Harold Stearns and Sinclair Lewis, and the reader can bring his stuff along with him, or he can send it to me care of my bank, if I have a bank. Now, if the reader is ready, and understand, I don't want to rush the reader any, we will go back to Yogi Johnson. But please remember that while we have gone back to Yogi Johnson, Scripps O'Neill and his wife are on their way to the beanery. What will happen to them there, I don't know. I only wish the reader could help me. Part 3. Men in War and the Death of Society. It may be likewise noted that affectation does not imply an absolute negation of those qualities which are affected, and therefore, though, when it proceeds from hypocrisy, it be nearly allied to deceit, yet when it comes from vanity only, it partakes of the nature of ostentation. For instance, the affectation of liberality in a vain man differs visibly from the same affectation in the avaricious. For though the vain man is not what he would appear, or hath not the virtue he affects to the degree he would be thought to have it, yet it sits less awkwardly on him than on the avaricious man, who is the very reverse of what he would seem to be. Henry Fielding. Chapter 11. Yogi Johnson walked out of the workman's entrance of the pump factory and down the street. Spring was in the air. The snow was melting and the gutters were running with snow water. Yogi Johnson walked down the middle of the street, keeping on the as yet unmelted ice. He turned to the left and crossed the bridge over Bear River. The ice had already melted in the river, and he watched the swirling brown current. Below, beside the stream, buds on the willow brush were coming out green. It's a real Chinook wind, Yogi thought. The foreman did right to let the men go. It wouldn't be safe keeping them in a day like this. Anything might happen. The owner of the factory knew a thing or two. When the Chinook blew, the thing to do was to get the men out of the factory. Then, if any of them were injured, it was not on him. He didn't get caught under the Employers' Liability Act. They knew a thing or two, these big pump manufacturers. They were smart, all right. Yogi was worried. There was something on his mind. It was spring. There was no doubt of that now. And he did not want a woman. He had worried about it a lot lately. There was no question about it. He did not want a woman. He couldn't explain it to himself. He had gone to the public library and asked for a book the night before. He looked at the librarian. He did not want her. Somehow she meant nothing to him. At the restaurant where he had a meal ticket, he looked hard at the waitress who brought him his meals. He did not want her either. He passed a group of girls on their way home from high school. He looked carefully at all of them. He did not want a single one. Decidedly, something was wrong. Was he going to pieces? Was this the end? Well, Yogi thought, women are gone, perhaps, though I hope not. But I still have my love of horses. He was walking up the steep hill that leads up from the Bear River out onto the Charlevoix Road. The road was not really so steep, but it felt steep to Yogi, his legs heavy with the spring. In front of him was a grain and feed store. A team of beautiful horses were hitched in front of the feed store. Yogi went up to them. He wanted to touch them, to reassure himself that there was something left. The nigh horse looked at him as he came near. Yogi put his hand in his pocket for a lump of sugar. He had no sugar. The horse put its ears back and showed its teeth. The other horse jerked its head away. Was this all that his love of horses had brought him? After all, perhaps there was something wrong with these horses. Perhaps they had glanders or spavin. Perhaps something had been caught in the tender frog of their hoof. Perhaps they were lovers. Yogi walked on up the hill and turned to the left onto the Charlevoix Road. He passed the last houses of the outskirts of Petoskey and came out onto the open country road. On his right was a field that stretched to Little Traverse Bay, the blue of the bay opening out into the big Lake Michigan. Across the bay, the pine hills behind Harbor Springs. Beyond, where you could not see it, Cross Village, where the Indians lived. Even further beyond, the Straits of Mackinac, with St. Ignace, where a strange and beautiful thing had once happened to Oscar Gardner, who worked beside Yogi in the pump factory. Further beyond, the Sioux, both Canadian and American. There the wilder spirits of Petoskey sometimes went to drink beer. They were happy then. Way, way beyond, and in the other direction, at the foot of the lake, was Chicago, where Scripps O'Neill had started for on that eventful night when his first marriage had become a marriage no longer. Near there, Gary, Indiana, where were the great steel mills. Near there, Hammond, Indiana. Near there, Michigan City, Indiana. Further beyond, there would be Indianapolis, Indiana, where Booth Tarkington lived. He had the wrong dope, that fellow. Further down, there would be Cincinnati, Ohio. Beyond that, Vicksburg, Mississippi. Beyond that, Waco, Texas. Ah, there was a grand sweep to this America of ours. Yogi walked across the road and sat down on a pile of logs where he could look out over the lake. After all, the war was over, and he was still alive. There was a chap in that fellow Anderson's book that the librarian had given him at the library last night. Why hadn't he wanted the librarian anyway? Could it be because he thought she might have false teeth? Could it be something else? Would a little child ever tell her? He didn't know. What was the librarian to him, anyway? This chap in the book by Anderson, he had been a soldier, too. He had been at the front 2 years, Anderson said. What was his name? Fred something. This Fred had thoughts dancing in his brain. Horror. One night in the time of the fighting, he went out on parade. No, it was patrol. In no man's land, and saw another man stumbling along in the darkness, and shot him. The man pitched forward, dead. It had been the only time Fred consciously killed a man. You don't kill men in war much, the book said. The hell you don't, Yogi thought, if you're 2 years in the infantry at the front. They just die. Indeed they do, Yogi thought. Anderson said the act was rather hysterical on Fred's part. He and the men with him might have made the fellows surrender. They had all got the Jim Jams. After it happened, they all ran away together. Where the hell did they run to, Yogi wondered. Paris? Afterward, killing this man haunted Fred. It's got to be sweet and true. That was the way the soldiers thought, Anderson said. The hell it was. This Fred was supposed to have been 2 years in an infantry regiment at the front. A couple of Indians were passing along the road, grunting to themselves and to each other. Yogi called to them. The Indians came over. "Big white chief got chew of tobacco?" asked the first Indian. "White chief carry liquor?" the second Indian asked. Yogi handed them a package of Peerless and his pocket flask. "White chief heap big medicine," the Indians grunted. "Listen," Yogi Johnson said. "I am about to address to you a few remarks about the war, a subject on which I feel very deeply." The Indians sat down on the logs. One of the Indians pointed at the sky. "Up there, Gitche Manitou the Mighty," he said. The other Indian winked at Yogi. "White chief no believe every goddamn thing he hear," he grunted. "Listen," Yogi said, and he told them about the war. War hadn't been that way to Yogi, he told the Indians. War had been to him like football, American football, what they play at the colleges, Carlisle Indian School. Both the Indians nodded. They had been to Carlisle. Yogi had played center at football, and war had been much the same thing, intensely unpleasant. When you played football and had the ball, you were down with your legs spread out and the ball held out in front of you on the ground. You had to listen for the signal, decode it, and make the proper pass. You had to think about it all the time. While your hands were on the ball, the opposing center stood in front of you, and when you passed the ball, he brought his hand up smash into your face and grabbed you with the other hand under the chin or under your armpit and tried to pull you forward or shove you back to make a hole he could go through and break up the play. You were supposed to charge forward so hard you banged him out of the play with your body and put you both on the ground. He had all the advantage. It was not what you would call fun. When you had the ball, he had all the advantage. The only good thing was that when he had the ball, you could roughhouse him. In this way, things evened up, and sometimes even a certain tolerance was achieved. Football, like the war, was unpleasant, stimulating and exciting after you had attained a certain hardness, and the chief difficulty had been that of remembering the signals. Yogi was thinking about the war, not the army. He meant combat. The army was something different. You could take it and ride with it, or you could buck the tiger and let it smash you. The army was a silly business, but the war was different. Yogi was not haunted by men he had killed. He knew he had killed 5 men. Probably he had killed more. He didn't believe men you killed haunted you. Not if you had been 2 years at the front. Most of the men he had known had been excited as hell when they had first killed. The trouble was to keep them from killing too much. It was hard to get prisoners back to the people that wanted them for identification. You sent a man back with 2 prisoners. Maybe you sent 2 men back with 4 prisoners. What happened? The men came back and said the prisoners were knocked out by the barrage. They would give the prisoner a poke in the seat of the pants with a bayonet, and when the prisoner jumped, they would say, "You would run, you son of a bitch," and let their gun off in the back of his head. They wanted to be sure they had killed. Also, they didn't want to go back through any damn barrage. No, sir. They learned those kind of manners from the Australians. After all, what were those Jerrys? A bunch of goddamn Huns. Huns sounded like a funny word now, all this sweetness and truth. Not if you were in there 2 years. In the end, they would have softened, got sorry for excesses, and begun to store up good deeds against getting killed themselves. But that was the 4th phase of soldiering, the gentling down. In a good soldier in the war, it went like this. First, you were brave because you didn't think anything could hit you, because you yourself were something special and you knew that you could never die. Then you found out different. You were really scared then. But if you were a good soldier, you functioned the same as before. Then after you were wounded and not killed, with new men coming in and going through your old processes, you hardened and became a good, hard-boiled soldier. Then came the second crack, which is much worse than the first. And then you began doing good deeds, and being the boy Sir Philip Sidney, and storing up treasures in heaven. At the same time, of course, functioning always the same as before, as if it were a football game. Nobody had any damn business to write about it, though, that didn't at least know about it from hearsay. Literature has too strong an effect on people's minds. Like this American writer, Willa Cather, who wrote a book about the war where all the last part of it was taken from the action in The Birth of a Nation, and ex-servicemen wrote to her from all over America to tell her how much they liked it. One of the Indians was asleep. He had been chewing tobacco, and his mouth was pursed up in sleep. He was leaning on the other Indian's shoulder. The Indian who was awake pointed at the other Indian, who was asleep, and shook his head. "Well, how do you like the speech?" Yogi asked the Indian who was awake. "White chief have heap much sound ideas," the Indian said. "White chief educated like hell." "Thank you," Yogi said. He felt touched. Here, among the simple aborigines, the only real Americans, he had found that true communion. The Indian looked at him, holding the sleeping Indian carefully, that his head might not fall back upon the snow-covered logs. "Was White Chief in the war?" the Indian asked. "I landed in France in May 1917, Yogi began. "I thought maybe White Chief was in the war from the way he talked," the Indian said. "Him," he raised the head of his sleeping companion up, so the last rays of the sunset shone on the sleeping Indian's face. "He got VC. Me, I got DSO and MC with bar. I was major in the 4th CMRs. "I'm glad to meet you," Yogi said. He felt strangely humiliated. It was growing dark. There was a single line of sunset where the sky and the water met way out on Lake Michigan. Yogi watched the narrow line of the sunset grow darker red, thin to a mere slit, and then fade. The sun was down behind the lake. Yogi stood up from the pile of logs. The Indian stood up too. He awakened his companion, and the Indian who had been sleeping stood up and looked at Yogi Johnson. "We go to Petoskey to join Salvation Army," the larger and more wakeful Indian said. "White Chief come too?" said the smaller Indian, who had been asleep. "I'll walk in with you," Yogi replied. Who were these Indians? What did they mean to him? With the sun down, the slushy road was stiffening. It was freezing again. After all, maybe spring was not coming. Maybe it did not make a difference that he did not want a woman. Now that the spring was perhaps not coming, there was a question about that. He would walk into town with the Indians and look for a beautiful woman and try and want her. He turned down the now frozen road. The two Indians walked by his side. They were all bound in the same direction. Chapter 12. Through the night, down the frozen road, the three walked into Petoskey. They had been silent walking along the frozen road. Their shoes broke the new-formed crusts of ice. Sometimes Yogi Johnson stepped through a thin film of ice into a pool of water. The Indians avoided the pools of water. They came down the hill past the feed store, crossed the bridge over the Bear River, their boots ringing hollowly on the frozen planks of the bridge, and climbed the hill that led past Dr. Rumsey's house and the home tea room up to the pool room. In front of the pool room, the two Indians stopped. "White Chief shoot pool?" the big Indian asked. "No," Yogi Johnson said. "My right arm was crippled in the war." "White Chief have hard luck," the small Indian said. "Shoot one game Kelly pool." "He got both arms and both legs shot off at Eep," the big Indian said in an aside to Yogi. "Him very sensitive." "All right," Yogi Johnson said. "I'll shoot one game." They went into the hot, smoke-filled warmth of the pool room. They obtained a table and took down cues from the wall. As the little Indian reached up to take down his cue, Yogi noticed that he had two artificial arms. They were brown leather, and both were buckled on at the elbow. On the smooth green cloth, under the bright electric lights, they played pool. At the end of an hour and a half, Yogi Johnson found that he owed the little Indian $4.30. "You shoot a pretty nice stick," he remarked to the small Indian. "Me not shoot so good since the war," the small Indian replied. "White Chief like to drink a little?" asked the larger Indian. "Where do you get it?" asked Yogi. "I have to go to Sheboygan for mine." "White Chief come with red brothers," the big Indian said. They left the pool table, placed their cues in the rack on the wall, paid at the counter, and went out into the night. Along the dark streets, men were sneaking home. The frost had come and frozen everything stiff and cold. Along the dark streets, men were sneaking home. The frost had come and frozen everything stiff and cold. The Chinook had not been a real Chinook after all. Spring had not yet come, and the men who had commenced their orgies were halted by the chill in the air that told them the Chinook wind had been a fake. That foreman, Yogi thought, he'll catch hell tomorrow. Perhaps it had all been engineered by the pump manufacturers to get the foreman out of his job. Such things were done. Through the dark of the night, men were sneaking home in little groups. The two Indians walked on either side of Yogi. They turned down a side street, and all three halted before a building that looked something like a stable. It was a stable. The two Indians opened the door, and Yogi followed them inside. A ladder led upstairs to the floor above. It was dark inside the stable, but one of the Indians lit a match to show Yogi the ladder. The little Indian climbed up first, the metal hinges of his artificial limbs squeaking as he climbed. Yogi followed him, and the other Indian climbed last, lighting Yogi's way with matches. The little Indian knocked on the roof where the ladder stopped against the wall. There was an answering knock. The little Indian knocked in answer, 3 sharp knocks on the roof above his head. A trap door in the roof was raised, and they climbed up through into the lighted room. In one corner of the room there was a bar with a brass rail and tall spittoons. Behind the bar was a mirror. Easy chairs were all around the room. There was a pool table. Magazines on sticks hung in a line on the wall. There was a framed autographed portrait of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow on the wall, draped in the American flag. Several Indians were sitting in the easy chairs, reading. A little group stood at the bar. "Nice little club, eh?" An Indian came up and shook hands with Yogi. "I see you almost every day at the pump factory." He was a man who worked at one of the machines near Yogi in the factory. Another Indian came up and shook hands with Yogi. He also worked in the pump factory. "Rotten luck about the Chinook," he said. "Yes," Yogi said, "just a false alarm." "Come and have a drink," the first Indian said. "I'm with a party," Yogi answered. Who were these Indians anyway? "Bring them along too," the first Indian said. "Always room for one more." Yogi looked around him. The 2 Indians who had brought him were gone. Where were they? Then he saw them. They were over at the pool table. The tall, refined Indian to whom Yogi was talking followed his glance. He nodded his head in understanding. "They're Woods Indians," he explained apologetically. "We're most of us town Indians here." "Yes, of course," Yogi agreed. "The little chap has a very good war record," the tall, refined Indian remarked. "The other chap was a major, too, I believe." Yogi was guided over to the bar by the tall, refined Indian. Behind the bar was the bartender. He was a Negro. "How would some Dog's Head ale go?" asked the Indian. "Fine," Yogi said. "2 Dog's Heads, Bruce?" the Indian remarked to the bartender. The bartender broke into a chuckle. "What are you laughing at, Bruce?" the Indian asked. The Negro broke into a shrill, haunting laugh. "I knowed it, Massa Red Dog," he said. "I knowed you'd order that Dog's Head all the time." "He's a merry fellow," the Indian remarked to Yogi. "I must introduce myself. Red Dog's the name." "Johnson's the name," Yogi said. "Yogi Johnson." "Oh, we are all quite familiar with your name, Mr. Johnson," Red Dog smiled. "I would like you to meet my friends, Mr. Sitting Bull, Mr. Poisoned Buffalo, and Chief Running Skunk Backwards." "Sitting Bull's a name I know," Yogi remarked, shaking hands. "Oh, I'm not one of those Sitting Bulls," Mr. Sitting Bull said. "Chief Running Skunk Backwards' great-grandfather once sold the entire island of Manhattan for a few strings of wampum," Red Dog explained. "How very interesting," Yogi said. "That was a costly bit of wampum for our family." Chief Running Skunk Backwards smiled ruefully. "Chief Running Skunk Backwards has some of that wampum. Would you like to see it?" Red Dog asked. "Indeed I would." "It's really no different from any other wampum," Skunk Backwards explained deprecatingly. He pulled a chain of wampum out of his pocket and handed it to Yogi Johnson. Yogi looked at it curiously. What a part that string of wampum had played in this America of ours. Would you like to have 1 or 2 wampums for a keepsake? Skunk Backwards asked. I wouldn't like to take your wampum, Yogi demurred. They have no intrinsic value, really, Skunk Backwards explained, detaching 1 or 2 wampums from the string. Their value is really a sentimental one to Skunk Backwards' family, Red Dog said. It's damned decent of you, Mr. Skunk Backwards, Yogi said. It's nothing, Skunk Backwards said. You'd do the same for me in a moment. It's decent of you. Behind the bar, Bruce, the Negro bartender, had been leaning forward and watching the wampums pass from hand to hand. His dark face shone. Sharply, without explanation, he broke into high-pitched, uncontrolled laughter. The dark laughter of the Negro. Red Dog looked at him sharply. I say, Bruce, he spoke sharply, your mirth is a little ill-timed. Bruce stopped laughing and wiped his face on a towel. He rolled his eyes apologetically. I can't help it, Massa Red Dog. When I seen Mr. Skunk Backhouse passing them wampums around, I just couldn't stand it no longer. What he want to sell a big town like New York for them wampums for? Wampums? Take away your wampums. Bruce is an eccentric, Red Dog explained, but he's a corking bartender and a good-hearted chap. You all right there, Massa Red Dog? The bartender leaned forward. I's got a heart of pure gold. He is an eccentric, though, Red Dog apologized. The house committee are always after me to get another bartender. But I like the chap, oddly enough. I'm all right, boss, Bruce said. It's just that when I see something funny, I just have to laugh. You know I don't mean no harm, boss. Right enough, Bruce, Red Dog agreed. You are an honest chap. Yogi Johnson looked about the room. The other Indians had gone away from the bar, and Skunk Backwards was showing the wampum to a little group of Indians in dinner dress who had just come in. At the pool table, the 2 Woods Indians were still playing. They had removed their coats, and the light above the pool table glinted on the metal joints in the little Woods Indian's artificial arms. He had just run the table for the 11th consecutive time. That little chap would have made a pool player if he hadn't had a bit of hard luck in the war, Red Dog remarked. Would you like to have a look about the club? He took the check from Bruce, signed it, and Yogi followed him into the next room. Our committee room, Red Dog said. On the walls were framed autographed photographs of Chief Bender, Francis Parkman, D.H. Lawrence, Chief Myers, Stuart Edward White, Mary Austin, Jim Thorpe, General Custer, Glenn Warner, Mabel Dodge, and a full-length oil painting of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Beyond the committee room was a locker room with a small plunge bath or swimming pool. It's really ridiculously small for a club, Red Dog said, but it makes a comfortable little hole to pop into when the evenings are dull. He smiled. We call it the wigwam, you know. That's a little conceit of my own. It's a damned nice club, Yogi said enthusiastically. Put you up if you like, Red Dog offered. What's your tribe? What do you mean? Your tribe. What are you? Sauk and Fox? Ojibwe? Cree, I imagine. Oh, said Yogi. My parents came from Sweden. Red Dog looked at him closely. His eyes narrowed. You're not having me on. No. They either came from Sweden or Norway, Yogi said. I'd have sworn you looked a bit on the white side, Red Dog said. Damned good thing this came out in time. There'd have been no end of scandal. He put his hand to his head and pursed his lips. "Here, you!" He turned suddenly and gripped Yogi by the vest. Yogi felt the barrel of an automatic pushed hard against his stomach. "You'll go quietly through the club room, get your coat and hat, and leave as though nothing had happened. Say polite goodbye to anyone who happens to speak to you, and never come back. Get that, you Swede?" "Yes," said Yogi. "Put up your gun. I'm not afraid of your gun." "Do as I say," Red Dog ordered. "As for those two pool players that brought you here, I'll soon have them out of this." Yogi went into the bright room, looked at the bar where Bruce the bartender was regarding him, got his hat and coat, said good night to Skunk Backwards, who asked him why he was leaving so early, and the outside trap door was swung up by Bruce. As Yogi started down the ladder, the Negro burst out laughing. "I knowed it," he laughed. "I knowed it all the time. No Swede gwine to fool old Bruce." Yogi looked back and saw the laughing black face of the Negro framed in the oblong square of light that came through the raised trap door. Once on the stable floor, Yogi looked around him. He was alone. The straw of the old stable was stiff and frozen under his feet. Where had he been? Had he been in an Indian club? What was it all about? Was this the end? Above him a slit of light came in the roof. Then it was blocked by two black figures. There was the sound of a kick, a blow, a series of thuds, some dull, some sharp, and two human forms came crashing down the ladder. From above floated the dark, haunting sound of black Negro laughter. The two woods Indians picked themselves up from the straw and limped toward the door. One of them, the little one, was crying. Yogi followed them out into the cold night. It was cold. The night was clear. The stars were out. "Club no damn good," the big Indian said. "Club heap no damn good." The little Indian was crying. Yogi, in the starlight, saw that he had lost one of his artificial arms. "Me no play pool no more," the little Indian sobbed. He shook his one arm at the window of the club, from which a thin slit of light came. "Club heap goddamn hell no good." "Never mind," Yogi said. "I'll get you a job in the pump factory." "Pump factory hell," the big Indian said. "We all go join Salvation Army." "Don't cry," Yogi said to the little Indian. "I'll buy you a new arm." The little Indian went on crying. He sat down in the snowy road. "No can play pool, me no care about nothing," he said. From above them, out of the window of the club, came the haunting sound of a Negro laughing. Author's note to the reader. In case it may have any historical value, I am glad to state that I wrote the foregoing chapter in 2 hours directly on the typewriter, and then went out to lunch with John Dos Passos, whom I consider a very forceful writer, and an exceedingly pleasant fellow besides. This is what is known in the provinces as log rolling. We lunched on roll mops, sole meunière, civet de lièvre à la chez cocotte, marmelade de pomme, and washed it all down, as we used to say, reader, with a bottle of Montrachet 1919 with the sole, and a bottle of Hospice de Bon 1919 apiece with the jugged hare. Mr. Dos Passos, I believe, shared a bottle of Chambertin with me over the marmelade de pomme, English apple sauce. We drank 2 Vieux Marques, and after deciding not to go to the Café du Dôme and talk about art, we both went to our respective homes, and I wrote the following chapter. I would like the reader to particularly remark the way the complicated threads of the lives of the various characters in the book are gathered together, and then held there in that memorable scene in the beanery. It was when I read this chapter aloud to him that Mr. Dos Passos exclaimed, "Hemingway, you have wrought a masterpiece." P.S. from the author to the reader. It is at this point, reader, that I'm going to try and get that sweep and movement into the book that shows that the book is really a great book. I know you hope just as much as I do, reader, that I will get this sweep and movement, because think what it will mean to both of us. Mr. H.G. Wells, who has been visiting at our home, we're getting along in the literary game, reader? Asked us the other day if perhaps our reader, that's you, reader, just think of it, H.G. Wells talking about you right in our home. Anyway, H.G. Wells asked us if perhaps our reader would not think too much of this story was autobiographical. Please, reader, just get that idea out of your head. We have lived in Petoskey, Michigan, it is true, and naturally many of the characters are drawn from life as we lived it then, but they are other people, not the author. The author only comes into the story in these little notes. It is true that before starting this story we spent 12 years studying the various Indian dialects of the North, and there is still preserved in the museum at Cross Village our translation of the New Testament into Ojibwe. But you would have done the same thing in our place, reader, and I think if you think it over you will agree with us on this. Now to get back to the story. It is meant in the best spirit of friendship when I say that you have no idea, reader, what a hard chapter this is going to be to write. And, as a matter of fact, and I try to be frank about these things, we will not even try and write it until tomorrow. Part 4. The Passing of a Great Race and the Making and Marring of Americans. But perhaps it may be objected to me that I have against my own rules introduced vices, and of a very black kind, into this work, to which I shall answer, first, that it is very difficult to pursue a series of human actions and keep clear from them. Secondly, that the vices to be found here are rather the accidental consequences of some human frailty or a foible than causes habitually existing in the mind. Thirdly, that they are never set forth as the objects of ridicule, but detestation. Fourthly, that they are never the principal figure at that time on the scene. And lastly, they never produce the intended evil. Henry Fielding. Chapter 13. Yogi Johnson, walking down the silent street with his arm around the little Indian's shoulder. The big Indian walking along beside them. The cold night, the shuttered houses of the town. The little Indian who has lost his artificial arm. The big Indian who was also in the war. Yogi Johnson, who was in the war too. The three of them, walking, walking, walking. Where were they going? Where could they go? What was there left? Suddenly, under a street light that swung on its drooping wire above a street corner, casting its light down on the snow, the big Indian stopped. "Walking no get us nowhere," he grunted. "Walking no good. Let White Chief speak. Where we go, White Chief?" Yogi Johnson did not know. Obviously, walking was not the solution of their problem. Walking was all right in its way. Coxey's army, a horde of men seeking work, pressing on toward Washington. Marching men, Yogi thought, marching on, and where were they getting? Nowhere. Yogi knew it only too well. Nowhere. No damn where at all. "White chief, speak up," the big Indian said. "I don't know," Yogi said. "I don't know at all." Was this what they had fought the war for? Was this what it was all about? It looked like it. Yogi standing under the street light, Yogi thinking and wondering, the two Indians in their Mackinaw coats, one of the Indians with an empty sleeve, all of them wondering. "White chief no speak?" the big Indian asked. No. What could Yogi say? What was there to say? "Red brother speak?" asked the Indian. "Speak out," Yogi said. He looked down at the snow. "One man's as good as another now." "White chief ever go to Brown's Beanery?" asked the big Indian, looking into Yogi's face under the arc light. No. Yogi felt all in. Was this the end? A beanery? Well, a beanery as well as any other place. But a beanery? Well, why not? These Indians knew the town. They were ex-servicemen. They both had splendid war records. He knew that himself. But a beanery? "White chief come with red brothers." The tall Indian put his arm under Yogi's arm. The little Indian fell into step. "Forward to the beanery." Yogi spoke quietly. He was a white man, but he knew when he had enough. After all, the white race might not always be supreme. This Moslem revolt, unrest in the east, trouble in the west. Things looked black in the south. Now this condition of things in the north. Where was it taking him? Where did it all lead? Would it help him to want a woman? Would spring ever come? Was it worthwhile after all? He wondered. The three of them striding along the frozen streets of Petoskey, going somewhere now, en route. Huysmans wrote that. It would be interesting to read French. He must try it sometime. There was a street in Paris named after Huysmans, right around the corner from where Gertrude Stein lived. Ah, there was a woman. Where were her experiments in words leading her? What was at the bottom of it? All that in Paris. Ah, Paris. How far it was to Paris now. Paris in the morning, Paris in the evening, Paris at night. Paris in the morning again. Paris at noon, perhaps. Why not? Yogi Johnson striding on, his mind never still. All three of them striding on together, the arms of those that had arms linked through each other's arms, red men and white men walking together. Something had brought them together. Was it the war? Was it fate? Was it an accident? Or was it just chance? These questions struggled with each other in Yogi Johnson's brain. His brain was tired. He had been thinking too much lately. On still they strode. Then abruptly they stopped. The little Indian looked up at the sign. It shone in the night outside the frosted windows of the beanery. Best by test. "Make 'em heap big test," the little Indian grunted. "White man's beanery got heap fine T-bone steak," the tall Indian grunted. "Take it from Red Brother." The Indians stood a little uncertainly outside the door. The tall Indian turned to Yogi. "White Chief got dollars?" "Yes, I've got money," Yogi answered. He was prepared to go the route. It was no time to turn back now. "The feed's on me, boys." "White Chief's nature nobleman," the tall Indian grunted. "White Chief rough diamond," the little Indian agreed. "You'd do the same for me," Yogi deprecated. After all, perhaps it was true. It was a chance he was taking. He had taken a chance in Paris once. Steve Brodie had taken a chance, or so they said. Chances were taken all over the world, every day. In China, Chinamen were taking chances. In Africa, Africans. In Egypt, Egyptians. In Poland, Poles. In Russia, Russians. In Ireland, Irish. In Armenia, "Armenians no take chances," the tall Indian grunted quietly. He had voiced Yogi's unspoken doubt. They were a canny folk, these red men. Not even in the rug game? "Red Brother think not," the Indian said. His tones carried conviction to Yogi. Who were these Indians? There was something back of all this. They went into the beanery. Author's note to reader. It was at this point in the story, reader, that Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald came to our home one afternoon, and after remaining for quite a while, suddenly sat down in the fireplace and would not, or was it could not, reader, get up and let the fire burn something else so as to keep the room warm. I know, reader, that these things sometimes do not show in a story, but just the same, they are happening. And think what they mean to chaps like you and me in the literary game. If you should think this part of the story is not as good as it might have been, remember, reader, that day in and day out, all over the world, things like this are happening. Need I add, reader, that I have the utmost respect for Mr. Fitzgerald, and let anybody else attack him, and I would be the first to spring to his defense. And that includes you too, reader, though I hate to speak out bluntly like this and take the risk of breaking up a friendship of the sort that ours has gotten to be. P.S. to the reader. As I read that chapter over, reader, it doesn't seem so bad. You may like it. I hope you will. And if you do like it, reader, and the rest of the book as well, will you tell your friends about it and try and get them to buy the book just as you have done? I only get 20 cents on each book that is sold. And while 20 cents is not much nowadays, still it will mount up to a lot if 200,000 or 300,000 copies of the book are sold. They will be, too, if everyone likes the book as much as you and I do, reader. And listen, reader, I meant it when I said I would be glad to read anything you wrote. That wasn't just talk. Bring it along, and we will go over it together. If you like, I'll rewrite bits of it for you. I don't mean that in any critical sort of way, either. If there is anything you do not like in this book, just write to Mr. Scribner's Sons at the Home Office. They'll change it for you. Or, if you would rather, I will change it myself. You know what I think of you, reader. And you're not angry or upset about what I said about Scott Fitzgerald either, are you? I hope not. Now I am going to write the next chapter. Mr. Fitzgerald is gone, and Mr. Dos Passos has gone to England, and I think I can promise you that it will be a bully chapter. At least it will be just as good as I can write it. We both know how good that can be if we read the blurbs, eh, reader? Chapter 14. Inside the beanery. They are all inside the beanery. Some do not see the others. Each are intent on themselves. Red men are intent on red men. White men are intent on white men or on white women. There are no red women. Are there no squaws any more? What has become of the squaws? Have we lost our squaws in America? Silently, through the door which she had opened, a squaw came into the room. She was clad only in a pair of worn moccasins. On her back was a papoose. Beside her walked a husky dog. "Don't look!" the drummer shouted to the women at the counter. "Here! Get her out of here!" the owner of the beanery shouted. The squaw was forcibly ejected by the Negro cook. They heard her thrashing around in the snow outside. Her husky dog was barking. My God, what that might have led to! Scripps O'Neill mopped his forehead with a napkin. The Indians had watched with impassive faces. Yogi Johnson had been unable to move. The waitresses had covered their faces with napkins or whatever was handy. Mrs. Scripps had covered her eyes with the American Mercury. Scripps O'Neill was feeling faint and shaken. Something had stirred inside him, some vague primordial feeling as the squaw had come into the room. "Wonder where that squaw came from?" the drummer asked. "Her, my squaw," the little Indian said. "Good God, man, can't you clothe her?" Scripps O'Neill said in a dumb voice. There was a note of terror in his words. "Her no like clothes," the little Indian explained. "Her woods Indian." Yogi Johnson was not listening. Something had broken inside of him. Something had snapped as the squaw came into the room. He had a new feeling, a feeling he thought had been lost forever, lost for always, lost, gone permanently. He knew now it was a mistake. He was all right now. By the merest chance he had found it out. What might he not have thought if that squaw had never come into the beanery? What black thoughts he had been thinking! He had been on the verge of suicide, self-destruction, killing himself, here, in this beanery. What a mistake that would have been. He knew now. What a botch he might have made of life, killing himself. Let spring come now. Let it come. It couldn't come fast enough. Let spring come. He was ready for it. "Listen," he said to the two Indians. "I want to tell you about something that happened to me in Paris." The two Indians leaned forward. "White Chief got the floor," the tall Indian remarked. "What I thought was a very beautiful thing happened to me in Paris," Yogi began. "You Indians know Paris. Good. Well, it turned out to be the ugliest thing that ever happened to me." The Indians grunted. They knew their Paris. "It was the first day of my leave. I was walking along the Boulevard Malesherbes. A car passed me, and a beautiful woman leaned out. She called to me, and I came. She took me to a house, a mansion, rather, in a distant part of Paris. And there, a very beautiful thing happened to me. Afterward, someone took me out of a different door than I had come in by. The beautiful woman had told me that she would never, that she could never see me again. I tried to get the number of the mansion, but it was one of a block of mansions, all looking the same. From then on, all through my leave, I tried to see that beautiful lady. Once I thought I saw her in the theater. It wasn't her. Another time I caught a glimpse of what I thought was her in a passing taxi, and leaped into another taxi and followed. I lost the taxi. I was desperate. Finally, on the next to the last night of my leave, I was so desperate and dull that I went with one of those guides that guarantee to show you all of Paris. We started out and visited various places. "Is this all you've got?" I asked the guide. "There is a real place, but it's very expensive," the guide said. We compromised on a price finally, and the guide took me. It was in an old mansion. You looked through a slit in the wall. All around the wall were people looking through slits. There, looking through slits, could be seen the uniforms of men of all the Allied countries, and many handsome South Americans in evening dress. I looked through a slit myself. For a while, nothing happened. Then a beautiful woman came into the room with a young British officer. She took off her long fur coat and her hat and threw them into a chair. The officer was taking off his Sam Brown belt. I recognized her. It was the lady whom I had been with when the beautiful thing happened to me. Yogi Johnson looked at his empty plate of beans. "Since then," he said, "I have never wanted a woman. How I have suffered, I cannot tell you. But I've suffered, boys, I've suffered. I blamed it on the war. I blamed it on France. I blamed it on the decay of morality in general. I blamed it on the younger generation. I blamed it here. I blamed it there. Now I am cured. Here's $5 for you, boys." His eyes were shining. "Get some more to eat. Take a trip somewhere. This is the happiest day of my life." He stood up from his stool before the counter, shook the one Indian impulsively by the hand, rested his hand for a minute on the other Indian's shoulder, opened the door of the beanery, and strode out into the night. The two Indians looked at one another. "White chief, heap nice fella," observed the big Indian. "Think him was in the war?" asked the little Indian. "Me wonder," the big Indian said. "White chief said he buy me new artificial arm," the little Indian grumbled. "Maybe you get more than that," the big Indian said. "Me wonder," the little Indian said. They went on eating. At the other end of the counter of the beanery, a marriage was coming to an end. Scripps O'Neill and his wife sat side by side. Mrs. Scripps knew now. She couldn't hold him. She had tried and failed. She had lost. She knew it was a losing game. There was no holding him now. Mandy was talking again, talking, always talking. That interminable stream of literary gossip that was bringing her, Diana's, marriage to an end. She couldn't hold him. He was going away from her. Diana sitting there in misery, Scripps listening to Mandy talking. Mandy talking. The drummer, an old friend now, the drummer sitting reading his Detroit news. She couldn't hold him. She couldn't hold him. She couldn't hold him. The little Indian got up from his stool at the beanery counter and went over to the window. The glass on the window was covered with thick, rimy frost. The little Indian breathed on the frozen window pane, rubbed the spot bare with the empty sleeve of his Mackinaw coat, and looked out into the night. Suddenly he turned from the window and rushed out into the night. The tall Indian watched him go, leisurely finished his meal, took a toothpick, placed it between his teeth, And then he too followed his friend out into the night. Chapter 15. They were alone in the beanery now, Scripps and Mandy and Diana. Only the drummer was with them. He was an old friend now, but his nerves were on edge tonight. He folded his paper abruptly and started for the door. "See you all later," he said. He went out into the night. It seemed the only thing to do. He did it. Only 3 of them in the beanery now, Scripps and Mandy and Diana, only those 3. Mandy was talking, leaning over the counter and talking. Scripps with his eyes fixed on Mandy. Diana made no pretense of listening now. She knew it was over. It was all over now. But she would make one more attempt. One more last gallant try. Perhaps she still could hold him. Perhaps it had all been just a dream. She steadied her voice, and then she spoke. "Scripps, dear," she said. Her voice shook a little. She steadied it. "What's on your mind?" Scripps asked abruptly. Ah, there it was, that horrid, clipped speech again. "Scripps, dear, wouldn't you like to come home?" Diana's voice quavered. "There's a new Mercury." She had changed from the London Mercury to the American Mercury, just to please Scripps. "It just came. I wish you felt like coming home, Scripps. There's a splendid thing in this Mercury. Do come home, Scripps. I've never asked anything of you before. Come home, Scripps. Oh, won't you come home?" Scripps looked up. Diana's heart beat faster. Perhaps he was coming. Perhaps she was holding him,